Podcast Talk.
Learn English naturally.
Self-discipline for success. We talk a lot about motivation, but motivation disappears, it comes and goes. Self-discipline is what stays when motivation leaves. It's what decides whether you show up, whether you follow through, whether things actually change. And most people misunderstand it completely because self-discipline isn't about pushing harder. It's about choosing differently every day.
That's the part people don't like hearing. They want discipline to feel inspiring, but most of the time it feels quiet, unimpressive, almost boring. It's choosing the same small action, even when no one is watching and nothing exciting is happening. And I used to think I lacked discipline, but really, I just expected it to feel dramatic. Once I accepted that discipline feels ordinary, it became much easier to practice.
Yes, and there's also this myth that disciplined people never struggle, that they wake up focused, confident, ready to do everything right. But discipline doesn't remove resistance. It works inside resistance. It's showing up while doubting yourself, while feeling tired, while wanting to quit. And that's why it actually builds confidence. Not because it feels good, but because it proves you can trust yourself.
I noticed this when I stopped waiting to feel ready. I used to delay things until I felt motivated, clear, in the right mood. And that moment rarely came. Aha discipline showed up when I decided that my mood didn't get to decide my actions. Not in a harsh way, hey, but in a calm, non-negotiable way. I don't argue with myself anymore. I just do what I said I would do. And that changed everything.
What really changed my understanding of self-discipline was realizing that it has nothing to do with pressure. I used to think discipline meant forcing myself, pushing through discomfort no matter what, ignoring how I felt completely. But that approach only worked for a short time. Then I'd burn out. Real discipline, for me, started when I became honest. Honest about my limits, honest about my energy, honest about what I could actually repeat every day. Discipline isn't about doing the maximum. It's about choosing what's sustainable and showing up for that choice even when no one applauds it. That kind of discipline feels quiet, but it lasts.
Yes, and sustainability is the part nobody talks about. People admire extreme routines, but they don't live with the consequences. I've seen so many people start strong, full of rules and intensity, only to quit a few weeks later. Not because they're weak, but because the system was never realistic. Discipline works when it fits your real life, your real schedule, your real energy. Once I stopped trying to impress myself and focused on what I could repeat without resentment, discipline stopped feeling heavy. It started feeling supportive.
And that's where discipline becomes empowering, because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're cooperating with yourself. You stop making promises you can't keep and start keeping the promises you make. Even small ones, especially small ones. Those tiny moments of follow-through build something much bigger than motivation. They build trust. And when you trust yourself, decisions become easier, progress feels steadier, and success stops feeling random.
One thing that really shifted my perspective was noticing how discipline shows up on ordinary days. Not the big, dramatic moments, the quiet ones. The days when nothing exciting happens and no one is watching. That's where discipline actually lives. It's choosing to do the small thing you committed to even when it feels pointless, even when progress isn't visible yet. I realized that success isn't built in moments of intensity. It's built in moments of neutrality. And discipline is what keeps you moving when motivation has already left the room.
Yes, and neutrality is so uncomfortable for people. We're addicted to emotional signals. We want excitement, inspiration, proof that something is working. But discipline asks for patience. It asks you to trust a process you can't feel yet. I remember times when I wanted to quit simply because nothing felt different. No reward, no rush, just repetition. And that's exactly where most people stop. Not because they're incapable, but because no one taught them that this phase is normal. Discipline carries you through that silence.
And once you understand that, discipline stops feeling like punishment. It starts feeling like protection. Protection from distraction, from constantly changing direction, from quitting too early. I stopped asking myself, do I feel like doing this today? And started asking, is this aligned with where I want to go? That question changed my consistency because alignment lasts longer than mood. And discipline is simply choosing alignment again and again, especially when it's quiet.
What people don't realize is that self discipline is deeply emotional. It's not just about actions, it's about identity. Every time you don't follow through, a small part of you stops trusting yourself. And every time you do, even in a very small way, that trust slowly comes back. I remember periods when he felt stuck, not because I lacked ability, but because I didn't believe my own promises anymore. Discipline rebuilt that belief, not by doing more, but by doing what I said I would do, even when it felt insignificant. That consistency changed how I talked to myself. I stopped being harsh. I stopped negotiating every decision. And that inner calm made discipline feel less like effort and more like alignment.
That trust is everything. Because once you trust yourself, you stop needing constant motivation. You don't rely on mood swings to decide your behavior. I used to wait until I felt confident to act. Now I act so confidence can catch up later. And that shift removed a lot of pressure. Discipline stopped being about control and became about reliability. I know what I'll do on hard days. I know how I'll respond when I don't feel like it. And that predictability is comforting. It frees up mental energy that used to be wasted on internal debates. Discipline simplified my life by reducing the number of decisions I had to make.
Yes, and simplification is such an underrated benefit. When you're disciplined, you don't constantly ask, should I do this? You already decided, and that decision creates space space to think creatively, space to rest without guilt, space to actually enjoy progress instead of chasing it. Discipline doesn't shrink your life, it expands it by removing unnecessary chaos. And the more you experience that, the less tempted you are to abandon it. Because discipline stops feeling restrictive. It starts feeling like freedom you've built for yourself over time.
Something else I didn't expect was how discipline changed my relationship with failure. Before, every missed a day felt like proof that I wasn't serious enough. One skipped habit, one bad week, and I'd mentally start over. But discipline isn't about perfection. It's about continuity. It's about understanding that progress is uneven by nature. When I stopped treating mistakes as personal flaws, I stopped wasting energy on shame. Instead of asking, why did I fail? I started asking, how do I return? That question is powerful because returning keeps momentum alive. Quitting kills it. And discipline, at its core, is simply the ability to return again and again without drama. That changed how safe it felt to try.
Yes, and that sense of safety is what most people are missing. They think discipline requires toughness, but what it really requires is self compassion. If every slip turns into self criticism, your nervous system learns that effort is dangerous. No wonder people avoid discipline. But when discipline is paired with kindness, it becomes sustainable. I noticed that once I allowed myself to restart without judgment, I stopped fearing inconsistency. I didn't need perfect streaks anymore. I needed honest ones. And honest streaks include pauses, setbacks, and adjustments. That's how discipline becomes something you can live with, not something you're constantly fighting against.
Another thing that people rarely talk about is how discipline protects your future self. Every small action you take consistently is a gift to the version of you that hasn't arrived yet. When I frame discipline that way, it stops feeling like sacrifice. It feels like cooperation across time. I'm not forcing myself, I'm helping myself. That perspective makes it easier to choose effort even when comfort is tempting, because I'm no longer fighting the present moment. I'm building a bridge forward. And discipline is simply walking that bridge, step by step, even when you can't see the end yet.
That long term view changes everything because once you see discipline as care, you stop asking, "How much can I get away with?" and start asking, "What supports the life I want?" That question naturally filters decisions. You don't need extreme rules. You need clarity, and clarity grows from repetition, from showing up even when it's quiet, even when no one notices. That's why discipline feels invisible at first. But over time, its effects become impossible to ignore. Not because life becomes perfect, but because you feel grounded inside it.
I also think discipline reshapes how you experience time. Uh, Before, my days felt fragmented. I jumped between tasks, moods, and intentions, always feeling slightly behind. Discipline didn't give me more hours, it gave my hours direction. When you commit to a few non-negotiables, time stops leaking through indecision. You're no longer asking yourself 100 micro-questions. Should I do this now? Should I wait? Should I skip today? That mental noise disappears, and with it, a lot of anxiety. I realized that discipline isn't rigid structure. It's a way of reducing friction. It makes movement smoother, and smooth movement feels calm, not stressful. That calm is what allows progress to compound quietly over time.
Yes, and that calm changes how success feels internally. We often imagine success as excitement, recognition, intensity. But sustainable success feels steady. It feels grounded. When discipline is present, you're not constantly chasing validation. You're anchored in your own standards. I noticed that once I stopped needing external motivation, my goals felt less fragile. They didn't depend on praise, results, or immediate feedback. They depended on my willingness to show up. That shift reduced pressure dramatically because when success comes from repetition, you don't panic during slow periods. You understand that quiet effort is still effort, and that understanding creates emotional stability.
Another thing discipline gave me was patience with outcomes. I used to expect quick returns. If something didn't work fast, I assumed it wasn't worth doing. Discipline taught me to delay evaluation, to keep going before judging results. That's uncomfortable because our culture rewards immediate proof, but real growth often hides. It develops beneath the surface. When you trust discipline, you stop checking results every day. You focus on the process, and ironically, that's when results start showing up. Not because you forced them, but because you stayed long enough for them to mature. Discipline keeps you in the game past the point where most people leave.
And staying is the hardest part. Anyone can start. Very few people stay. Discipline isn't glamorous because staying is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. But staying builds depth. Depth in skill, depth in confidence, depth in identity. When you stay with something long enough, it becomes part of who you are, not just something you do. And that identity shift is powerful. You're no longer trying to be disciplined. You are disciplined, not because you're strict, but because your actions align with your values. That alignment feels peaceful, and peace supports long-term success better than pressure ever could.
If there's one thing I wish more people understood, it's that discipline is not about control. It's about care. Care for your future, care for your energy, care for your direction. When you see discipline that way, you stop resisting it. You stop treating it like a burden. You start treating it like support. Something that holds you steady when motivation fades, when emotions fluctuate, when life becomes unpredictable. And that steadiness, that quiet reliability is what success is actually built on. Not intensity, not talent, but the ability to keep showing up with clarity and intention over time.
I think the most misunderstood part of discipline is that it actually creates emotional freedom. People assume discipline limits you, but chaos limits you much more. When every decision is open, every option possible, your mind never rests. I remember feeling mentally exhausted even on days when I did very little. Not because I worked too much, but because I constantly negotiated with myself. Discipline removed that inner noise. It answered questions before they appeared, and that allowed my emotions to settle. I wasn't constantly evaluating myself, judging my progress, or questioning my direction. That stability gave me space to enjoy life without feeling guilty for slowing down.
That inner negotiation is exhausting. People don't realize how much energy it takes to constantly decide who you're going to be today. Discipline decides that in advance, not rigidly, but intentionally. Once I committed to certain standards, I stopped rethinking them every morning. And that consistency shaped my confidence. I didn't need to hype myself up. I didn't need external motivation. I just followed a structure I trusted. That trust didn't come from talent or inspiration. It came from repetition, from proving to myself over and over that I could be relied on.
And that reliability changes how you face uncertainty. When life becomes unpredictable, disciplined people don't panic as easily. They know they can return to their basics, to the actions that ground them, to the habits that stabilize them. Discipline becomes a reference point, a place you can stand when everything else feels unstable. I noticed that even during difficult periods, I didn't lose myself completely because discipline had already built a foundation. Not a perfect one, but a strong enough one to hold me.
That foundation also changes how you handle pressure. Instead of reacting emotionally, you respond practically. You don't ask, "How do I escape this?" You ask, "What's the next right step?" Discipline narrows your focus in a healthy way. It keeps you from spiraling. And the more often you rely on it, the more stable you feel under stress. Pressure stops feeling like a threat. It becomes something manageable. Not easy, but navigable. And that's a huge difference.
I also think discipline teaches humility. It reminds you that success isn't dramatic, it's repetitive. It's built quietly. When you accept that, you stop comparing yourself to extremes. You stop chasing fast results. You focus on what you can sustain. That shift removes a lot of unnecessary disappointment because you're no longer expecting transformation overnight. You're expecting progress over time. And that expectation feels kinder, more realistic, more human.
Exactly. Discipline keeps you grounded in reality, not in fantasy versions of who you could be, but in the version of you that actually shows up. And that's the only version that can succeed. Once you accept that, discipline stops feeling heavy. It becomes a companion. Something that walks with you, not something that pushes you forward. And that companionship is what allows success to grow without destroying your peace.
If there's one thing we want you to take from this conversation, it's that self discipline isn't about becoming someone else. It's about becoming more honest with who you already are. You don't need to be extreme. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to change everything at once. You just need to choose a direction and keep choosing it when the day feels ordinary. Discipline grows quietly. It doesn't announce itself. But over time, it reshapes how you think, how you decide, and how you trust yourself. If this episode resonated with you, subscribe to OffScript English and tell us in the comments what topics you'd like us to talk about next. Thanks for spending this time with us.